Class. Today we're going to continue our unit on leadership versus management with a lesson called What Great Managers Do by Marcus Buckingham. We'll go over at the beginning to talk about a little bit about the hard work of being a soft manager, which was your reading for homework. We're going to talk about playing chess versus checkers, which is part of the great managers lesson, and then we'll do some follow-up work. So with the reading hard work of being a soft manager, we want to think about how does this relate to the management theories that we've talked about and the thoughts that we've uncovered with Fair Process. And so the management theories that we talked about consisted of classical versus behavioral managers. And so the soft management style should reflect some of the behavioral manager theories that you looked at versus the classical manager. And so you want to think about, does this make sense? Is it more difficult to be a soft manager? Is it easier? What scenarios work best for soft management? And even for yourself, do you think that you would work better underneath a soft manager, or maybe you would work better underneath a hard manager? Think about your own motivation in school. Is it better if you have more freedom? Do you work better? Do you accomplish more? Or do you think that you need to have someone, looking over your shoulder, kind of ensure that you get things done and giving you a little bit less autonomy? And so you want to continue to reflect on this reading to think about what works for you and maybe why it works for you and in what situations. And maybe in what situations does another management style work for you. And so uncovering this for yourself will be vitally important to figuring out how maybe you can even use this in your future. And so we want to go on with today's lesson. And so the first thing we want to look at is the game of chess and checkers. And so if you're unfamiliar with these two games, you'll want to take a look at the left side. This is an example of checkers where you have these circular pieces where you can only go diagonally on the same color, and you can jump over pieces to capture them, etc., etc. Whereas this is chess, where each piece is different. They all have different functions. They can all do different things to try to defeat the other player. And so I start the question in this class talking about what's more difficult, or what are the differences between chess and checkers, and to see if you can play them. And so first, what's more difficult to do or to play, and why? And so often you'll talk about how checkers is simpler than chess. Chess is more complex. There are more variations. It's more difficult. It requires a different kind of skill set. Checkers is simpler to understand, but there's still strategy involved. In checkers, all the pieces do virtually the same thing until they become queens. In chess, the pieces are all different, and they all have different skill sets. Ultimately, each game, the goal is to beat the other player. In chess, you're trying to defeat their king. In checkers, you're just trying to capture all the other pieces and to try to win the game. So what's more like a leader and what's more like a manager, and why? And so you want to try to figure out, what kind of skill sets do you need to play each game? And so the analogy is that managers actually are more like players of chess, while leaders are more like players of checkers. And so it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's just that they utilize different skill sets. And of course, I'm not saying this is always the case. And in fact, both managers and leaders have both of these characteristics. But this is kind of an extremist kind of analogy. And so let's figure out, why do I think that managers are more like chess players while leaders are more like checker players? And so managers, their job typically is to utilize the skill sets of different people, right? Figuring out what each person does best and how best to put them in positions to succeed. While a leader might be someone who's better able just to rally people behind a cause and push the entire mass of people or this group forward to achieving a certain goal, right? So those two kind of skill sets and kind of like goals are quite different. And so it requires a different skill set to kind of learn about your people and to utilize them the best, versus someone who's able to give a rousing speech or to rally people behind or to influence people in a specific way, right? And so those are the differences as the analogy to chess and checkers works, right? Just trying to push people towards this goal, a singular goal of checkers, versus trying to play chess where you're trying to make each piece and utilize each piece the best they can in order to ultimately achieve this greater goal which you all kind of work towards, right? So leaders rally people to causes for a better future outcome, while managers try to turn ability into performance, right? And so that's the difference. And so today we're going to look more at that turning ability into performance piece, looking at what great managers actually do. And so let's see what that translates to. And so what great managers do. The ability to keep tweaking rules to capitalize on the uniqueness of each person is the essence of great management. Just as employees are varied and different, a manager's approach to capitalizing on these differences will vary from organization to organization. And so here you can see, I hope you can start to see where I'm going with this, right? What the manager's role is, what the manager's trying to accomplish with their people, and trying to make them best suited and best positioned to achieve and to succeed within an organization. And so here I want to identify a specific word that's used, capitalization, right? What is it to capitalize? Capitalize is to utilize someone to the best of their ability, or to take that person and put them in the best position for them to succeed and for them to succeed for you, to capitalize on their skill set to help your organization succeed. And so we're going to look at this capitalization. So 4 ways capitalization works for us and works for you and works for businesses. So 1, capitalizing on strengths and uniqueness saves time. And so what exactly does this mean? What am I trying to say here? So if I am a leader or a manager trying to get my workforce to be the best, to be the fastest, to be the most efficient, what should I try to do? I should try to look at each individual person and put them and use them to where their strength is. Because clearly, if I use them where their strength is and put them in situations in my organization where they are best at, it's going to save time. Because if I'm not putting them there, I'm going to put someone else there who's not as good at it. And I'm also going to put that person in a different role where they are not quite as skilled, right? So you want to use their natural skill sets where they belong, right? I can try to train someone up to do something, which is fine. And everyone should be trained to do more than one job, I suppose. But why not just put someone in that job who's already skilled at it? That makes more sense and saves you time, saves you money, and saves you resources, right? Take advantage of people's natural skill sets and abilities versus trying to mold someone into something they aren't, right? I don't want to put someone in a situation and try to train them up in it if they don't show any natural propensity to do it, right? I'd rather take the other person, if I have a good interview skills and good management skills, and take that person and say, look, you have a natural ability to do this task, or to lead this group, or to do this skill, or have these ideas, or whatever it may be, and put them in that position so they can utilize that strength of theirs, right? There are people who have natural strengths and natural weaknesses that you need to utilize and put them where their strengths lie, because it will save you time and save you money. 2, capitalizing on uniqueness increases accountability. So what do I mean? So first, we need to understand that people have unique strengths, okay? We want to capitalize on those strengths, and what will they do? They'll increase accountability. Accountability meaning what, right? So if I say accountability, I mean that where people are going to rely on you, okay? You are going to feel more responsible for your task. So when someone is more accountable, they'll feel more responsible for a specific task. They'll feel responsible for what they do. They'll be accountable to the rest of the team, to you, to the boss, to their peers, right? So if you are doing something where you have strength, and you know you have strength there, you know you have ability there, you have responsibility to take on some role or some task or to accomplish something, you're going to feel accountable, right? You will take that on. You're more likely to grasp that and to say, you know what, this is my job, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to succeed at it, and you can count on me to do it, right? People who want to do this, or people who can do this, people who are in roles where they feel that they have strength, they're much more likely to invest time to improve, to practice, to refine, to be better, to be more accountable, right? Think about it a different way, right? Think about if your boss puts you in a job where you don't have skill set, you're not very good at it, and then you fail. Like, do you feel bad? Of course you might feel bad, right? But really, in the end, whose fault was that, right? Your boss putting you in a position where you are not going to succeed, where you're going to fail? It's not your fault, really. So you might not take responsibility for it. You'll think, well, why was I there in the first place? Right? If you're bad at something, you're not going to want to improve it as much. You're not going to refine your skills, and you'll feel less accountable to do the best at that thing, right? So it's no surprise where, say for sport, you're good at something, and so you want to practice that thing, right? You always want to do it because you want to get better at that thing because you feel good at it. It makes you feel better. Versus if you're not as good at a sport, maybe you might not want to go and play that as much, right? You want to be in positions where you will succeed and you're going to do better, right? Put you in situations where you have skill set and can be your best. So when you feel like you are accountable, you're going to feel responsible. And that kind of leads us to the next capitalization, next way, because 3, it creates a stronger sense of team. And so you are in a role where you are feeling accountable to your peers, to your team. You feel responsible. You will feel bad if you fail. You want to succeed for them because you are in a position of strength. Okay? That means that everyone that's part of your team is in their own position of strength. Right? Think about if you're on a basketball team. If you're a point guard, you're a center, you're a small forward, whatever you do, you are likely, or you should be, doing what you do best, right? And so that way, you rely on your other teammates to fit a role, to do their job, right? And so you know you can't do their job. They know they can't do your job. And so your being capitalized on your strength creates a team. It creates interdependence, a reliance on each other to succeed. Because you do the best you can at your job, your peer does the best they can at their job, and that will make you all the more better. Right? Your coworkers fill in the gaps for each other. Right? It creates interdependence where you are comfortable doing what you do and you do it well. They're comfortable doing what they do and doing it well. And you know, together you will be better. Right? And the third thing is that it actually reduces competition. Right? Because if you're doing what you do best and you're paired with someone else who does what they do best, and they're two different things, you're not looking at each other as competition, more as teammates. Right? Whereas if you're both doing the same kind of thing with the same kind of strength, you're competing with each other. Right? You want to be in teams with multiple skill sets to do different things. And so often I'll use this example in class where I'll let kids choose groups, right? And so oftentimes what do? They stand up and they look for their friends and they go, okay, we'll be a group of 3 or we'll be a group of 4. And so your friends get together. And of course, in high school, that makes sense. You want to be comfortable. You want to be friends. But this is not actually the best strategy to doing the best work. Because you might all be friends, but you might have all exactly the same skill set. So you might all be very, very good at presenting, yet none of you are very good at doing research, or none of you are very good at details, or whatnot, right? It actually makes a lot more sense for you to seek out people that do really well at the things that you don't do very well, right? Do something where you have strength and find people who can do other things that maybe you're not so good at. So maybe you're great at presenting, they're great at research, the other person's great at making PowerPoints, and then you have a great team that can do more than 3 people who are all good at presenting. Maybe you're all great at just talking, but your PowerPoint's no good and your research is terrible, right? The way you design your team is important, right? But in high school, you're not gifted managers yet, so you might not know this, or you might not know how to create this. But if you do, and if you can capitalize on people, you will create better teams and stronger teams, and teams that work together. The last one is it creates a healthy degree of disruption. So capitalization creates a healthy degree of disruption. So what do I mean by this? And so we've talked before briefly in class about how companies need to change. They need to change how they do things. They need to get better. They need to work through different ideas, right? And so, what does this mean? This means that we need to have a belief, or we need to accept the fact that things should change and our organization should change. And if we accept that, we want change to happen. And in industry, change only is going to cause disruption, right? And this disruption is typically caused by people who are great at what they do, who aren't afraid to push the envelope, who are good at what they do, and so they're comfortable saying, you know what, this thing is not done the right way, right? It should be done a different way, right? There's no assumption of roles. There's no assumption of you are this, therefore you must stay in your lane, right? If you are an expert, if you are strong in this system, you are going to push the envelope in this category or in this realm of expertise, right? You want to create people and put them in positions where they are not complacent, right? If you put them in a position where they're not very good at it, they're just they're just earning a paycheck, they'll be complacent. They're not going to push the envelope. They're just going to do whatever the bare minimum is and walk away, go home, collect their money, right? You don't want that as a worker. You want someone who is going to push, push, and push and not be complacent. You want them to change their role. You want them to grow their role. You want them to create change. People who are experts, who are in their strength, people who are working from a place of confidence, think about change, because change is good, right? We want things to change because we want organizations to grow. We want things to be different, right? We want to challenge the status quo. People who are uncomfortable where they are typically don't challenge status quo. People who are comfortable and strong and powerful in what they do are more likely to ask the hard questions and say, should we really be doing it like this? Questioning what's always been. Choosing to say, you know what? I'm comfortable where I am. I'm strong. I know I can do this, and I know there's a better way, right? You want those individuals in your workplace, and they probably already exist, but it's your job to put them in places where they feel like they can cause disruption and not be vilified for it. So this is all about when you do capitalize. So let's capitalize on people. But the question is, how do you capitalize? And so there are three things that we need to try to do. We need to first figure out, what are my people's strengths? 2, what will trigger that strength into action? What's going to cause my workers to act on their strength? And 3, how do employees learn? Right? How do I make them better? Where they're strong and where they're weak. How are they going to get better and to be the best that they can be? How do they learn to do more? Okay, so these are the 3 things we want to do to try to capitalize on our workers. First is to identify their strengths and their weaknesses. So 1, we want to observe them, right? See where your individuals and see where your workers are best, right? You want to observe them in their natural habitat. You want to see and identify and figure out how they work, right? You don't do this just sitting in your office. You need to relate with them. You need to talk with them. You need to be on the ground where they're working to find out, how does this person work? You need to figure out anecdotal evidence, right? Seeing them thrive, right? When do they get out of their shell? When do they brighten up? When, in what work situations are they thriving? Versus when do they kind of cower back? When do they not kind of feel comfortable and look comfortable? You need to figure out, when does this worker perform better? And why is that the case? Right? You need to see how genuine they are in regular workplace behaviors, right? You can't bring them into your office and try to figure out all this kind of stuff, right? Their answers are not going to necessarily be the ones you're looking for when you ask the questions. Your presence, just merely your presence in an office interview situation, might not be the best. But you need to go down and see where they are. You need to see what people say about them. You need to observe them in actual workplace, right? What's the genuine article here? How are they really? Not when they know they're being evaluated, but when they're just always working, right? So you need to ask 2 questions. So 1, what was the best day at work that you've had in the past 3 months? This could be any period of time, but What did they enjoy the most? So think about this for yourself, right? When were you doing your best? When were you having your best situation of work, right? Think about why that was the case, right? Was it because you're interacting with people? Was it because you're doing something that you loved? Was it because that you were succeeding? Like what are the things that make you thrive, right? Versus what was the worst day you've had at work in the past 3 months? And this could be at school, this could be anywhere really. But what makes you really kind of just hate being there, not do well, right? And these answers are going to be different for all your workers, right? So you need to ask the question. Like you could literally ask them this question. Probably better to observe it. Probably better to kind of gather data through time. But your workers probably already know, how do they work the best? What makes them work the best, right? So you need to figure out what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses, and cater what they do to their strengths as much as possible. Ultimately, you want to find out what drives them and what drains them. You want to put them in situations where they're driven, and they're driven to do more for you and for your organization. And you want to take away as much as possible the situations that drain them. Right? You cannot fully do it all the time, right? But you don't want to continue to put your workers in situations that drain the energy out of them, because that's not going to be good for them or you, right? Those workers will burn out. Those workers will get resentful. Those workers will just quit, right? Many things can happen, but you do not want that to happen. You want to get them to feel driven, and you want them to drive more change. So, another point to this identifying strengths is you're more likely to succeed by building on strengths versus overcoming weaknesses. Okay? And so, again, this is not to say you are not trying to make your weaknesses stronger. Of course, you want to make your weaknesses stronger. 100%. No doubt. But you're probably going to see more success if you make someone's strength better and capitalize on that, versus trying to make them better at something that they're not very good at, right? I can try super hard to make your weakness your strength, but ultimately your weakness is probably never going to be your strength, especially if I'm going to try to make your strength even better. So build on strength versus overcoming weaknesses. Ultimately, you want to build on your strength and you want to overcome your weakness, but building on strength is usually more effective. And so I want to kind of identify two differing or opposing kind of thoughts. One is self-assurance. Okay, self-assurance is how you feel when you do something when you are confident with it. Right, you are assured of your ability. It allows you to persist harder, to persist further. Right, you're good at math, and so you get a math problem that's very difficult. So you persist, you try to solve it, you want to get it, you're determined to solve this problem, to achieve this goal, to do all these kinds of things. Overcome, achieve, succeed, right? Self-assurance does that for you, right? Versus if you're not very good at math and you get a challenging math problem, if you're not self-assured with it yourself, you're likely to just push it away and just not try to persist or overcome the hardship. Right? So self-assurance is what I want to impress upon you. You want your people to be assured of their status in the company. You want people to be assured of their strength and your confidence and your faith in their ability. And that's very different than self-awareness. Again, and self-awareness isn't bad, but that's just kind of a different lens to look at things. Now, understanding your weaknesses, right? I know I'm not very good at this thing. But knowing that I'm not very good at this thing doesn't necessarily make me a better worker. It just helps me understand to avoid that thing until I can make my weakness stronger. Right? Does that make sense? My assurance will help me become a better worker in certain situations. My awareness helps me perhaps avoid bad situations. Right? So that's not necessarily going to improve my output or my performance. That's just going to stop me from getting bogged down into difficult situations. So they're very, very two different ways of thinking here. Okay. Another point is when an employee succeeds, it's not good enough to praise the hard work. You want to show their success being hard work, but also to connect that with their ability of just being good at it. You want them to think and to be confident with themselves that the next time this happens again, they're going to succeed because they have this natural ability, or they are good at this thing and they're strong at this thing, and they'll continue to do and to succeed with it, right? You want to connect both of those things. So you want to improve their self assurance, you want to improve their confidence, you want to give them good, positive, solid feedback, right? If they fail at this thing, you want to connect that with their work effort being not great. But you don't want to connect that with being ability being poor, right? Because if you connect their failure to poor ability, it destroys confidence. It destroys self assurance. So you want to say, if that person failed at this, if they didn't succeed, whatever, for whatever reason, and you want to connect that with, what, you didn't work hard enough, which doesn't sound great, but hard work is a simple solve. Not having the ability to do something, that's a much more complicated thing, right? So you want to give them assurance that they can overcome and succeed at whatever this thing may be. And so these are all methods and kind of tips to kind of look at strengths and how to create strength and put people in positions of strength, right? So their capitalization goes well. But again, I'm not going to ignore the weaknesses aspect. And so we want to make sure that we also want to overcome your weaknesses. And so how do we do that? So there are a few straightforward approaches. One, offer training. Clearly, train them. Make them better at it, right? That seems pretty simple, right? So you want to train them up and make sure that they can do it. If you are trying to train them and you realize that they're just not getting better at it, at some point you have to come to a conclusion that maybe these resources for training need to stop, and that this is just a talent deficit that this person cannot overcome. And so, this doesn't mean to get rid of this person. This means to make sure that they are not in a position where this is a problem, right? So you need to, as a manager, to figure out where to better allocate your resources. And if this person can't be trained up, there's a talent deficit that maybe you have to figure out. And so if there's a talent deficit, you'll probably want to partner them, right? You want to partner with them with people who are strong where they have talent deficits, right? So this again comes back to this whole when you're in high school, getting groups of people together, right? When you have groups working on things, find someone who has what you are deficit in, because that will help your overall output, right? So talent deficit isn't the end of the world, because we are in a collaborative environment where we're working together with people. And so there's always going to be people who can be strong where you are weak, and then you can be strong where they're weak, right? So partner them, okay? 3, succeed through discipline instead of instinct. So if there's weakness, right? So we've already identified that weakness exists. And so if weakness exists, it's unlikely that someone's going to be able to just to get it, snap their finger, one day, now it makes sense, right? We don't want that to be the person's responsibility. We're more likely to accomplish goals and tasks if we can give this person a routine that's going to help them solve this problem. Okay? So make this employee go through steps and procedures where they're overlooking their work, where they're going through this checklist of things, because they're not instinctually going to be able to do it correctly or as well as you would hope them to be. And so create a discipline. Discipline works. Discipline matters, which is why sometimes when you have weakness in a subject area or weakness in a skill like organization, you're told to do various steps and giving you various skills and techniques to get through these things. And it's not through instinct, it's through discipline that will get you through these weakness points in your skill set, right? Evaluate the work to a point where discipline of scrutiny will enable them to improve the quality where instinct could not, right? You want them to improve and give them the tools to improve. Not tools that they're instinctually going to get, but tools that you can give them that will give them a checklist to figure out if there are mistakes within their work or if there are mistakes within their approach. you want to give them that, right? Make it disciplined, not instinct. And four, render the weakness irrelevant, right? If they're a weakness at something, if they're weak at something, don't make them do it, right? Take it out. Do something else. Put them in a situation where they'll succeed and the weakness does not become a problem, right? So redesign your structure, right? You can't be too caught up in this scenario where everything has to stay the same, right? And the assumption here is that you want to keep this worker, right? If you want to keep this worker, you don't have to keep them doing these things that they can't do. You want them to do things that they will succeed at. So those are four things that will help you identify or get through weaknesses. Okay, and so that was the first category of identifying strengths and making strengths happen. The second part is to actually make that strength come out, make that individual use their strength for the advantage of your business. Okay, and so how do we do this? And so we need to figure out what triggers what you want your people to do. And so we've talked about money before. We talked about how money is a factor, a motivator, but ultimately money is not the best nor biggest or most important factor, right? It is part of this need that we have for money to get and acquire certain types of things, but that's not ultimately what triggers these strengths in our workers, right? So this is a quote. The most powerful trigger is by far recognition, not money. And so I'm going to read a quote from a reading that we have, the Marcus Buckingham reading. So you need to give recognition. And so what is recognition? Recognition is not always, telling your people, so-and-so did a great job. So-and-so, made the big account or had the big sale or signed the biggest client. That's recognition. But not all recognition is the same. So think of yourselves, right? Think of how many of you, if you won something, would want to be announced in the front of the school versus some people think, oh, that's the worst situation that I would want. I would never want to be kind of brought in front of the school and kind of paraded about, right? But some people love that. Some people thrive on that kind of stuff. And so I'm just going to read you an excerpt from this reading. It's at HSBC. And so read along with me if you'd like. But here it is. The most powerful trigger by far is recognition, not money. If you're not convinced of this, start ignoring one of your highly paid stars and watch what happens. Most managers are aware that employees respond well to recognition. Great managers refine and extend this insight. They realize that each employee plays to a slightly different audience. To excel as a manager, you must be able to match the employee to the audience he values most. One employee's audience might be his peers. The best way to praise him would be to stand him up in front of his coworkers and publicly celebrate his achievement. Another's favorite audience might be you. The most powerful recognition would be a one-on-one conversation where you tell him quietly but vividly why he is such a valuable member to the team. Still, another employee might define himself by his expertise. His most prized form of recognition would be some type of professional or technical award. Yet another might value feedback only from customers, in which case a picture of the employee with his or her best customer or letter to her from the customer would be the best form of recognition. Given how much personal attention it requires, tailoring praise to fit the person is mostly a manager's responsibility, but organizations can take cues from this too. There's no reason why a large company can't take this individualized approach to recognition and apply it to everyone or to every employee. Of all the companies I've encountered, the North American division of HSBC, a London-based bank, has done the best job of this. Each year it presents its top individual consumer lending performers with its Dream Awards. Each winner receives a unique prize. During the year, managers ask employees to identify what they would like should they win. The prize value is capped at $10,000, and it cannot be redeemed in cash. But beyond these two restrictions, each employee is free to pick the prize he wants. At the end of the year, the company holds a Dream Awards gala, during which it shows a video about the winning employee and why he selected his particular prize. You can imagine the impact these personalized prizes have on HSBC employees. It's one thing to be brought up on stage and get given yet another plaque. It's another thing when, in addition to the public recognition of your performance, you receive a college tuition fund for your child, or the Harley Davidson motorcycle you've always dreamed of, or the prize everyone at the company still talks about, the airline tickets to fly you and your family back to Mexico to visit the grandmother you haven't seen in 10 years. So these are just examples of how recognition works, right? They're all different types of recognition for different types of people by a company, right? These things are important. And again, how do you know what kind of recognition your people need? By knowing them, by relating to them, to talking to them, right? You have to understand and ask these questions and want to know your people. You need to be behavioral. You need to be relational. Otherwise, you'll never know any of these things. And lastly, number 3, we need to look at how do your people learn, okay? And learning styles are things that many of us have learned about and talked about. And so this is just going to be 3. There are many, many, many more. And of course, these don't encompass all of them, but we just want to clearly look at a few to see and to understand that there are differences. So number 1 is analyzing. Understanding by dissecting, examining. These individuals need information, right? These individuals want to know all outcomes. These individuals need time and information. And so let's look at this person, right? You have a worker who is an analyzer, right? And maybe you don't know this. And so maybe you just tell someone to do something or tell someone to deal with a situation. And this analyzer wants to perform, wants to do well, yet this analyzer doesn't know the situation. This analyzer doesn't feel comfortable making choices until they have more information. And yet maybe you tell them, I need to have a decision by the end of the day, right? This person needs to understand the whole situation. They need the information. They need to analyze what's going on. They need time to figure out. They need time to process. This individual operates differently than someone else, right? They need to analyze and to dissect information to feel comfortable with what they're doing. So that's one learning style. 2 is doing. And so let me pause there. We are all learning styles. Okay, we do all of them. We just kind of cater to some more than others in different situations. Okay, and so personally, I'm an analyzer, typically, right? But as you'll see, I'm also a doer. And so I'll just give you an example here. So doing is by trial and error. You learn it by doing it. And then you ultimately will get better at it the more you do something, right? And so I'm an analyzer, and so I want to know things. I want to understand how things work. I want to know more information because I want not to be wrong, and I want to be able to do it right before I do it, right? But you can't always do that. And so if any of you drive, some of you drive, if any of you drive standard, it's a whole different ballgame than driving an automatic vehicle, right? So if any of you drive standard, you know that you can't learn to drive standard by reading the manual, right? When I first learned to drive standard, I learned I bought my sister's car, and it was a standard car. We met at my mom's house. I drove her home in the standard car, so she gave me a lesson while I was driving her home. I dropped her off, and then I had to drive home by myself, by trial and error. You learn it by doing it. I stalled, whatever, but that was the only way I could learn how to do this task. I could read as many books as I wanted. I could watch as many YouTube videos as I wanted, but there was no way I was going to learn how to do it other than by doing it, right? So again, I typically am an analyzer, but I'm also a doer in certain types of things. And so again, we are all of them, but which do you cater more to? And to understand your people, you want to understand what they do more, or what they want to learn, or how they want to learn more. And the last one is watching. You want to observe in its entirety. Some people don't want to do it. They want to see someone else do it. Okay? Someone doesn't want to read the manual. They want to see someone do it, and then they can do that task or that skill set after seeing how it's done. Right? And so again, we are all 3 of them. We just happen to do some more than others. And in other situations, others will want to do other things. Right? So Again, you want to know how your people learn, right? You'll want to know if your worker will want the manual to this thing and want to read about it and to want to learn about it themselves, versus if they want to go and train with the previous person who did it, or if they want to watch someone, all these kinds of things, right? So as the manager, you want to learn how your people learn because that will help you make them better. Ultimately, you want that for your organization. And so, how are we going to conclude? To conclude, you want to play chess, okay? You want to manage people. You want to appreciate the individual, right? You want to know that you want each individual to know that they're important, and you have to appreciate that they actually are important as individuals, not as some one large mass, right? It's not the Industrial Revolution where your workers are just pieces that you put in place to complete tasks. Your individuals have uniqueness and ability that's going to help your organization. 2, don't try to change a person's style. Each individual's style is suitable to something. Some better than others, some maybe are better for certain industries than others, and so you have to be a better hiring individual to get the right people in your firm. But again, their style is going to be good for certain types of things, so utilize that. Use your time as a manager to learn about your employees. Okay, invest into them. Invest your time into them. Have relationships and learn and be a behavioral manager. Identify your differences and utilize them. Right? People are different. It's not a bad thing. Utilize those differences and make sure that you put them in the situations that they can be capitalized on. Last final quote is great managing is about release, not transformation. Okay? Great managing is about release, not transformation. Right? So think about this quote. You want to make sure that you take your workers and not try to change them into something that they're not. You want to release their potential, release their strength, release them into improving and being better versions of what they already are. So that concludes our lesson on what great managers do. And so I want you to go back and read the article to solidify your knowledge of this topic. And so on Edsby, I'll want you to make a post on one of the two things, okay? Contemplate the following about yourself in relation to today's reading and lesson. So 1, how do you like recognition? 2, what learning style do you have? Okay, so I want you to post about one of these things. Discuss your how you like recognition. Talk about why, in what way, etc. And 2, write a post on Edsby about your learning style. Okay, give me evidence of what this learning style is. Explain why you think this is more about you. So do one or the other, not both of them. Okay, so that was today's lesson on what great managers do. Thank you.